With that, welcome to America's Heroes Group. This time with our Roundtable partner, Community Outreach, with partner Katz Milanec. Today is Saturday, September 23rd, 2023. September is National Suicide Prevention and Hispanic Heritage Month. Our host is Cliff Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host, Army National Guard veteran. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And we have online again today David Milanec. He's a CPA and president and founder of Katz Milanec and a military family member. We're going to continue the discussion of end-of-the-year tax deadlines for individuals and businesses because deadlines are approaching. We have about a quarter left. How you doing, David?
Oh, doing good. Actually, there's about a month left for the deadline for individual tax returns with extension. So if you missed the April deadline, but you have but you filed an extension, you still have another about 20 days to get that return filed because it's due October 16th.
Wow. And then what are some of the things that people need to be doing if they're having trouble? What are some of the hang-ups and why people are being late with their extension to things like that, do you see?
Well, one of the biggest problems that people have when they are running late with their taxes is for some reason or another they can't get their documents. That's actually a big thing that we can help with. If someone comes into our office, we can sign a power of attorney with them with the IRS. All it does is give us the ability to access the information the IRS has on them and pull down their documentation and represent them before the IRS. And by doing that, we can get all their information from the IRS, and we can put together a tax return based on that.
And if there's things that are missing or maybe incorrect, so they found some documentation or found some other tax credits that they didn't claim, things like that, they can always file an amended return. Is that right?
Yes, that's true. It's important that you make sure you get filed timely because if you are even 1 day late on the first day, if you owe taxes, you have a 5% penalty. If you are the deadline is mid-month. So on the 17th of October, you have a 5% penalty. Now you move to November 1st, now you have a 10% penalty because they charge you a failure to file penalty of 5% for each month or part of a month that you are late.
Wow. And there's no way to get those rebated back unless there is an error? Is that right? How does that work?
Well, if you have a refund, the good news there is you wouldn't get a penalty either way because that percentage is based off of a tax liability. If you don't have a tax liability, there's nothing to charge you. So if you have a refund, you wouldn't get a penalty even if you were late.
So what happens in a situation where a person is, in the IRS's eyes, has a tax bill, and the tax bill is not paid, and their taxes aren't filed by the 15th of October, and then?
Okay, well, there's a couple of things that can happen there. Sometimes the IRS will just leave it and wait for you to file, and then they'll hit you with the penalties. Sometimes the IRS will file what's called a substitute for return. In other words, the IRS takes the information that they have, the stuff that I can get by getting that power of attorney and pulling down what's called a wage and income transcript. Well, they take it and they put together a tax return for you. But they do the absolute worst possible case scenario. I've seen some examples where, like, somebody had a 1099 for, let's say, $100,000, and the IRS put together a tax return for them and so kindly gave them a $40,000 tax bill.
Wow. So you're like looking at the worst case scenario for the benefits the government for the most part.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what they're there for. That's what they're doing. They will tell you that they are there to represent the interest of the government. So you need someone who's there to represent your interest, like us. If you are in a situation where you have not filed yet or you don't know what your situation quite looks like, give us a call, 708-914-8220. We can help you out.
So then take that same situation. So that person gets hit with a $45,000 tax bill, and then say January of the next year, which is after the deadline, they've been hit with a bunch of penalties. they find their paperwork and they bring it to you and they say, you know what, I should have filed, but I didn't. The government sent me this nasty gram saying that I owe them all these taxes and things like that. But when you do the taxes, you find that they weren't liable, that they actually would get a small refund. So how does that process work? And then what happens at that point? What happens to all those penalties and fees and things like that? Do they just go away?
So that's the great news if you have a substitute for return. If you have a substitute for return, that's just what the IRS has assessed you. That doesn't mean that that's the final word, that's the bottom line. What that means is that they are expecting you to file a tax return. You can still file an original tax return even after the IRS has filed a substitute for return on your behalf. And if you do that, if you do end up with a refund, you'll get that refund. So in that situation, let's say it's a similar situation, but we look at that individual, and that individual actually has 3 kids, and they actually had, let's say, $70,000 or so in expenses on top of that $100,000 of income. Well, they're going to get an earned income credit, and they're going to get a child tax credit, and part of that child tax credit is going to be refundable, and the end result is that they're going to get a pretty decent refund on that tax return. But that's not the way the IRS would have filed it. The IRS would have filed them as married filing separate because that's the absolute worst tax rate possible, and they wouldn't have included the dependents, and then they would just put the $100,000 on a Schedule C, charge them the 15.3% self-employment tax on that, which is another $15,000, charge them the $20,000 or so of income tax, hit them with penalties and interest, and now you're well over $40,000. And turns out that person actually should have gotten, a $3,000 or $4,000 refund.
So that can be really important information, particularly for service members who are deployed and maybe they are not keeping up with their finances as well as they should. And they get in a situation where they haven't filed taxes, and next thing you know, the deadline is rolled past. They can still do their return and come out with a favorable situation.
Well, military service members actually even have their own specific exemption. If you are out on a service assignment during the time that you're supposed to file and you miss the filing, if you can prove that you were out on assignment, your deadline, specifically your deadline, is extended by the period of time that you were out on service assignment.
So does that mean when you come back, the first day you come back from deployment, is your taxes due that day, or do you have a grace period?
So like, for example, let's say somebody was supposed to file taxes, and on March 15th, they got deployed, right? Mm-hmm. And they got back on, let's say, December 15th. Just to make things easy. So it's like a 9-month period, right? Mm-hmm. So during 9 months, that deadline is just automatically extended. Mm-hmm. Okay? And so what would happen is, because they had, about 30 days before the deadline prior to leaving, mm-hmm. they would have about 30 days when they get back.
I think that's important to recognize. And then, because the thing of it is that a lot of people, they feel hopeless. They just think that they have no recourse. They think that they're worried about sometimes that it might snowball and become a worse situation and becomes overbearing. But is there ever a real reason to be scared about filing taxes?
I suppose if you're Al Capone, but apart from that, if you're not Al Capone, then you should be fine. The absolute worst thing that could possibly happen is that they're going to charge you penalties and interest, and in all likelihood, they're just going to come after you for money. Mm. There are certain things that are technically criminal in the statute about not filing and everything like that. But they don't use those on normal people. They use those in situations like Al Capone. The reason they were able to take him down was because he didn't file his taxes on his illegal enterprises. Wow. And so because he didn't file his taxes, they were able to get him on tax evasion and put him in prison.
Mm-hmm. But the average person who hasn't filed, maybe they had some under-the-table income or whatever and didn't file taxes for 7 years, and they wake up one day and say, you know what, I should have filed my taxes. Is it a good idea for that person to say, you know what, because the thing of it, the situation is oftentimes, and I'm not going to name any names, but I know some people that been in a situation where then their situation changes. Now they're making money, and then they file a return after, and they're still young. They're not like retired or anything like that. And now they have income, and that's reported to the IRS, but they're under the cash income that they haven't filed on. The IRS doesn't know anything about, and or they're going to get audited. So they, even when they start getting income, like regular W-2 income or whatever, 1099 income or whatever, they're still not filing their taxes because they're worried about what's going to happen if they just file taxes out of nowhere one day.
So it's always a better idea to catch up your taxes if you're behind than not. And here's why. Let's say you don't file your 2023 tax return, or I'm sorry, your 2022 tax return. That's what year we're dealing with right now. Let's say for some reason you just don't file your 2022 tax return, and it gets to be 15 years later and you are making a lot of money. So the IRS decides to go back and audit you. Well, you don't have a 2022 tax return on file, so they still have the ability to assess that 2022 tax return. And oh, wouldn't you know it, the IRS has decided that you're making just as much money now as you did then.
Wow.
Just as much money then as you do now. And now they want a tax bill that because they're going to claim that you didn't pay it. And the problem with that is that the IRS, anything the IRS asserts is considered prima facie evidence. That means it's automatically considered to be correct, and it is your job to disprove it. So if you file a tax return, even if you file it late, the IRS has 3 years to assess that tax return. If they don't assess that tax return within 3 years, in other words, they don't look at it and decide to audit you, they don't have any more time to do it at that point.
Wow. So how long can you go back and amend a tax return?
If you're trying to claim a refund, you can only go back up to 3 years from the due date of the return, or up to 2 years from the day the tax was paid, whichever one is later. And sometimes you can pay the tax and then file the amended return and get a refund. That would be the situation like that. If you're just trying to reduce a balance, though, you can file an amended return at any point that you still have a balance. So if you are looking at a return that's 6-7 years old and you have let's say the IRS says you owe $25,000, but you can prove that you actually only owe $5,000, and then with the penalties and interest that becomes, let's say, $7,500 to $10,000. Well, now we've just reduced that balance for you by at least $15,000.
Now, what are some of the things that business owners need to think about, and even individuals, as we approach December 31st?
Well, I mean, this is a great time to do tax planning, because if you thought that this year, if you were like, oh, wow, I really had to pay a lot this year, I was caught off guard by that. Well, the reason you were caught off guard by it is because you didn't look at your tax situation until it was time to file taxes. If you look ahead now at your 2023 tax situation, you can figure out if you're on track to have a refund or if you're on track to owe. And if you want to change that situation, you can do that. So if we look at your tax situation and we project that you're going to make X amount of dollars, and as a result of making X amount of dollars, you're going to owe $10,000, you can make a payment. Well, there's two options there. Option number one is that we can look at what are some things that we could do in terms of deductions and things like that. For example, if someone was to buy a car in their business's name, and it's the right type of car, we could fully depreciate it in that year. That would drastically reduce the profit and therefore probably reduce the tax liability as well. Maybe even eliminate the tax liability. Or option number two would be to look at, okay, it's looking like I'm going to owe $10,000. Let me just pay $10,000 in now. And then when tax time comes, I won't have a bill.
Now, you're a proponent of, because a lot of CPAs I noticed, they for their clients, because clients think this way, they'd rather have their clients not get a tax bill rather than hold their money throughout the year, put it someplace to earn interest, and then pay the tax at the end of the year. Are you in that? What are your thoughts on that?
I would agree with that because you don't know how much the IRS is going to charge you at the end of the day. And you're going to get hit with more than just interest. You're also going to get hit with penalties. You're going to get hit with failure to pay penalties, potentially failure to file penalties, and interest. So, and you don't know that the amount that you would make would be more. I would say if you're break even or better, you're okay to hold on to your money. But if you're actually going to be at the point where you're going to owe money to the IRS, you should pay that in to make sure you don't owe that money.
As a safety measure in case you're late, basically.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, what are some of the things that you think are the biggest, this low-hanging fruit that people don't take advantage of on their taxes to get refunds or increase their tax deductions?
Well, there's a lot of different things. From a business perspective, if you're someone out here who is in the gig economy and everything like that, you're doing Uber, Instacart, everything like that. One of the lowest hanging fruits, if you are someone who's an independent contractor, is to incorporate, because whatever money you make throughout the year as doing gig economy work, you have to pay income taxes on it. But if you are taxed as a sole proprietor, you also have to pay what's called self-employment tax on that. That's 15.3%. So even on $10,000 of earnings, you're not going to have to pay income tax on $10,000 of earnings, of net earnings from self-employment, but you will have to pay $1,500 of self-employment tax. And so if you incorporate, you get out of that self-employment tax. And I actually offer, I call it a guarantee because I've called it other things before and people have told me not to. I guarantee people that if you come to me and I tell you need to incorporate and you don't save at least the amount of money you paid me to incorporate you in the first year, I will pay you back the difference.
I like that. That's pretty good.
That's how confident I am that will save people money.
Now, what's your contact information again?
We are Katz Milanec. You can visit us at katzmilanec.com. That's KATZMILANEC.com. Our number is 708-914-8220. Again, that's 708-914-8220. You can call us now, schedule an appointment, and we can help you get these taxes done for the deadline.
Dave, was always great information. I have some more questions I want to ask you, but we're out of time. This is America's Heroes Group. We'll be right back in a minute.
Hi, this is Cliff Kelley, Vietnam veteran, co-founder, and host of America's Heroes Group. We have helped hundreds and thousands of veterans find the resources they needed to move on past trauma, find the services they need to heal, find training, jobs, and housing. That's our mission. To support this mission so that we can continue our work and have even more veteran stories of overcoming and success, we need your help. Right now, please consider making a donation to America's Heroes Group. Dig deep and give what you can to support this mission and help those veterans in need. You can donate through Chase Bank Zelle app by adding America's Heroes Group as a recipient with our phone number 312-804-5831. You can donate through PayPal on our website, americashg.org. From the home page, go to donations, or you can go straight to www.americashg.org/donations. And finally, you can send a check to America's Heroes Group, Inc., 155 North Quaker Drive, Suite 4250, Chicago, Illinois, 60606.
Welcome back to America's Heroes Group with our partner, All Rise. Today is Saturday, September 23rd, 2023. September is National Suicide Prevention and Hispanic Heritage Month, and also Recovery Month. Our host is Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith. Our digital media producer is Ortega of Scouts Art and Productions. And our panelist, Frutchey, is a board member of All Rise and involved with the founding of the National Treatment Court Alumni Association. And she's going to talk about Recovery Month, which is September. This is our month. So how are you doing today?
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and so excited to talk about Recovery Month.
So tell us, how did Recovery Month come about and what is it all about?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So Recovery Month has been a nationally recognized month since 1989, actually, so over 30 years. SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, our national administration, had really used this month as an opportunity to highlight not only the work that's happening to support recovery from substance use disorder, but really support and highlight the hard work that's happening across our country by community members impacted, families impacted, and those professionals that are working in the field. So over 30 years of celebrating recovery across our country. It's been a really beautiful experience.
And tell me a little bit about your involvement with the establishment of the National Treatment Court Alumni Association. What is that association about, and what is the work that you're doing there?
Yeah, I'd love to share a little bit about that. So first, it's really important that I share that I, too, am a person in recovery, so I was directly impacted by substance use disorder myself and involvement within the justice system. So I'm also a graduate of the treatment court program, which many people know as drug courts nationally. We have almost 4,000 specialty courts across the country, which really focus on diverting individuals without out of the justice system and into treatment and recovery and in their communities. And we, too, have been in existence. Treatment courts have been in existence since the late 1980s. And so you can just imagine how many lives have been transformed. And much like mine, there's so many individuals that have had a profound impact from their experience within treatment courts. The National Treatment Court Alumni Association is a group of treatment court graduates from across the country, from Alaska to Maine, where I'm located, that came together a handful of years ago that said, what would it look like if we connected in a way that we could support other treatment court graduates and courts across the country to really advance opportunity for individuals that have lived through the experiences, not only to share our stories, but really to inform policy, programmatic decision-making, advocacy, reduce stigma. And so this group of individuals that came together, we've now formed an organization, and we're working in collaboration with All Rise, and we're just so excited to be able to bring forward the voice of lived experience.
I really appreciate you sharing that information, because it puts people like you coming on our show, and people like my father, people that have been through recovery, and my family, I think it really gives an identity and puts a face to recovery. I think that's really important because we need to do a better job of what we do in our criminal justice system to try to not just punish. And I say this over and over again because we're in a punishment mentality sometimes, or culture, instead of a fixing the situation recovery culture. We benefit so much more from helping people get back on their feet and become productive members of society and doing great things like you're doing versus just letting people go back and forth in and out of prison and wasting court money and taxpayer money and not really solving the problem, letting problems get even worse even. I appreciate the work that you're doing. Tell me some of the benefits of what the program does and how you help people that need to recover.
Yeah, and so the work of the national, so I have so many hats that I wear, and so I'd like to just share a little bit of that for some context. As I shared, I'm a person in recovery. I've also been a social worker, so worked in a professional capacity to assist other individuals that have been impacted by substance use and justice involvement. I was appointed to the board of directors of All Rise as the first treatment court graduate. And this all plays into the work that we do and why it's just so extremely important. The National Treatment Court Alumni Association, our role is to be able to help support courts, these specialty courts that I just spoke of, that we have close to 4,000 across our country, to support courts in really understanding how they can really utilize the graduates of their program as an asset. You had just really identified when we start really looking at the benefit of engaging individuals with lived experience and just all that they bring to the work, just how that can really grow our programs, heal our communities, really end generational patterns of substance use or family substance use. And so our work at NTCAA is to support courts to really know how they can build alumni groups and support their alumni while also connecting with alumni across the country. So we have a few different roles around advocacy, reducing stigma, knowing that alumni are not alone, and also educating courts on how they can really benefit from building out their alumni networks within their courts and programs.
About how many people now are in the Alumni Association?
So we started with 11. We started as a think tank. It was this really organic coming together where, again, from Alaska to Maine, we said we want to really think about what this could look like. And from day one, we've had a motto, and it's shoot for the moon. Collectively, we've experienced a lot of traumas in our life. We've experienced the systemic stigma that perpetuates the systems that we engage with, and we had felt the power of recovery, and so we've said shoot for the moon, and we've continued to do that. Right now, we have 133 members strong, and it is growing, and we have just this past June is when we opened up membership, so we're still in our infancy. And so we're just really excited to be able to work with All Rise to bring our knowledge as individuals with lived experience forward and to support courts as they, again, build out their alumni networks.
Now, is it only open to people that have gone through recovery, or is it open to anybody?
Yeah, so NTCAA is open to any graduates of treatment court programs, any professionals working within the court or court system, or any professional or organization that supports the mission. So no, it's not just open to treatment court graduates. We do have certain opportunities that are specifically for treatment court graduates only, but our membership is open to anyone that wants to and aligns with the mission of our organization.
Having been someone who's gone through recovery yourself, what is the most important thing that a person who needs to go through recovery needs to understand?
So for me, it's really how I viewed recovery has shifted a bit over the years. I've been in recovery for a bit of time now, and I really look at recovery from substance use as similar to recovery from any medical condition. When we think about going into surgery, what do they do immediately following surgery? They put you in a recovery room. They prepare you for recovery. They make you comfortable. They give you instructions. But what also happens is it's a little bit, the healing process is a little different for everyone. I view recovery from addiction as just that. It's a healing process, and it could look vastly different for you as it did for me. It also could mean that there's a recurrence, or I take a step back, just like if I was healing from any other medical condition. You know, we have setbacks. We might get sick again. We might have barriers. And so when I'm really looking at recovery, I look at it as healing. But what I know is I can't heal alone. Addiction comes with many invisible wounds. And so oftentimes this is where the stigma comes in, because it can't be seen. It's not visible, much like maybe a mental health condition or a trauma that someone's been impacted by. And because those are invisible, community doesn't always understand. And so the healing from those invisible wounds, doing it alone can be trying, it can be overwhelming, and I've really come to recognize that it takes a community, meaning others that have walked the path before me, but also, just like recovery from a medical condition, it means I need community to surround me. I need an employer that will hire me. I need a landlord that will rent an apartment to me. I need a school that will enroll me and not say, because of your history, we won't allow you to pursue your education. I need a community that will embrace me so I can heal and thrive in my recovery. And I say that to everyone that may be either starting their journey, continuing their journey. Find your community. For some of us, it is just that. We're in a community where workforce, education, peer support is vibrant. And in other communities, that may be smaller. It may be just the peer group. And so really finding what that community means to you is so important to that healing process.
So say you're a spouse maybe, or a child of someone who needs to go through recovery, or maybe struggling with recovery. What advice could you give to those people who are witnessing or trying and want to help that person to have successful recovery?
Yeah. One of the first things I say is you're recovering too. You know, you too have gone through this journey, even if you were not the one directly impacted by the substance use disorder. You've been along for the ride, so to say. And that may have come with a lot of, here's those invisible wounds, right? The impacts to relationships, the financial burdens, the worry, the fear, all of those things that can come. And I always say to family, make sure that you're healing too, because it can't just be the individual with the substance use disorder. You heal, and we'll just stay over here. It's really about how can we heal as a family. My husband is also a treatment court graduate. And we met on our recovery journeys, but we have 3 children, and we describe ourselves as a family in recovery. And what that means is, while not all of our children have lived through our active substance use, it's very important that they see what recovery means to us and what it means to treat people with dignity that may still be impacted by active substance use. And so for families, it's their healing journey as well. Is so important. And once we heal together, it can just make that experience healthier. And so that's always what I recommend.
Now, say a person's in prison now or has been arrested and they've gone to jail. Maybe they've been in jail several times. Can that person get into a treatment court situation, particularly if they're a veteran or if they're or in a certain situation where they committed a crime? A lot of it has to do with their substance abuse, whether it be alcohol or drugs or whatever, but they are veterans. And of course, part of the treatment court system is also looking at veterans. There's a veterans court, which is a big part of treatment court.
It absolutely is, yes. Justice for Vets, veteran treatment courts play a significant role in supporting our veteran community members. And yes, again, we have treatment courts across the country. Every state has treatment courts. And it really is looking at targeting individuals that have substance use disorder, or in the instance of veterans treatment courts, it may be a mental health condition or experienced trauma. Substance use disorder may not be a primary challenge in their life at that time. But yes, it is available across the country, and depending on what the charges that brought them into the justice system is really at targeting high-risk, high-needs individuals. So this is individuals that may have a severe substance use disorder, history of multiple engagements with the justice system without successful completion or kind of a reoffense. So it's really about targeting those high-risk, high-needs. There's many other diversion programs across the country that may be for kind of lower risk or lower needs or kind of a pre-arrest intervention. But treatment courts, that model has always been a high risk, high needs. And we hope that it is always offered to everyone that comes across through the justice system that meets that criteria.
So make it more clear. So if the person's already in jail, can they still get help to get treatment, or do they have to get arrested again? Does it start when they're in the court? Or does this? Or
yeah,
can they do it
so
after
it is. It does happen most treatment courts are pre-adjudication, which means it is part of their formal plea agreement through like the district attorney or the state's attorney. State to state, it may differ a little bit, but it is part of their plea agreement. Actually, best practices show that if that is part of the plea agreement, actually upfront jail time is not appropriate. That goes back to what you were saying earlier. Some old school theories of thought are punish them and then treat them, and we know that that's just not effective. It doesn't do anything except cost taxpayer dollars. It's really about getting them into treatment. So it is that pre-adjudication. We do have some states that are probation courts that if someone's on probation and they're not successful on probation, there's multiple violations, they may move right into a treatment court. So that's typically how the process goes. If someone is released from jail or prison and it is part of their plea agreement, it may be entry into treatment court.
But if someone goes to jail and they never get the opportunity to be in treatment court, it's not suggested to them or their attorney doesn't advocate for it, and they go to jail, and they can do their time, come out, chances are they're probably going to fall back into the same scenario. Maybe, hopefully not, but they might go back in that same activity and then end up in jail again. Maybe make sure that person knows that their treatment court is a real thing, that you can actually try to get it. Makes it now. Do prosecutors who are assigned to, or what do you call it? But prosecutors assigned to the system, not your private attorneys, but court-appointed attorneys, do they advocate for treatment court oftentimes? Do you see?
Yeah, well, and so my practice, I've been practicing within treatment courts professionally since 2012 right here in Maine. I live in the easternmost county of the United States, so we're really right in the corner on the coast. And I can speak so highly for the work that happens here locally that it is a first line of intervention. So anytime anyone comes through that is meets those eligibility criteria, it is an offer. Now, it is a voluntary program, and, there may be individuals that say, actually, that sounds really hard. Most treatment court programs are a minimum of 12 months, and on average, they last 16 months. It is community-based service, meaning they're staying within the community, they're not incarcerated, and they're only engaged in maybe residential substance use treatment if that is deemed appropriate. But otherwise, they're in the community, they're living, they're working, they're engaging in treatment and their requirements for a treatment court. But an individual could decline it as well. And so sometimes it depends on what the negotiation is with the prosecutor as far as any jail time versus the commitment for treatment and recovery courts. Again, I'd like to think that what we see here in the court that I work is what we're seeing across the country. It's definitely the majority of what we see. And we work with courts at All Rise. Our focus is on leading. We're the leaders in research, advocacy, and training and technical assistance for all of those courts that I spoke of. And so if we see a court that is not pursuing that, or if we have courts say, like, we really need some help supporting or training our prosecutors or our judges, that's the work of All Rise. That's what we do. We bring research forward. We bring best practices forward to make sure that the field is informed on why these interventions are so effective in so many ways.
So it might be a note to some of our veteran community and even our civilian community that have people in their families that are struggling with recovery to even have that conversation. Have they been approached? Has anybody talked to them about treatment court? So because if that situation or a similar situation happens again and they're getting the handcuffs put on them because they got into a fight at a bar or were doing a DUI or whatever, then they really don't have an excuse not to try and confront this situation head on by getting some help through treatment court or a program like Veterans Court or things like that. I think it's interesting because you were when you went through recovery, you said you met your spouse through the recovery. How do you guys support one another as husband and wife?
Oh, goodness. That's a great question. We really support each other's goals to really drive forward with our passions. We both recognize that recovery and our recovery journeys may look vastly different. Mine may be education or other goals of interest, his career, outdoor wilderness, and we just are so supportive of kind of that shoot for the moon motto again. Nothing is impossible. And when you can have someone in your life that encourages you to try those hard things or step into something that's scary, or when you have self-doubt and they say, I know you'll do it, then you just know that you have that perfect person in your life. And my husband, Brian, is that for me, and I like to think that I'm that for him. And again, surrounding ourselves with community. And our recoveries, while so interconnected, are also so separate. And that's important to each of us, too, really being able to support what it means to each of us to be a person in recovery.
So when you were in your darkest moment, because I understand, treatment court is difficult. That's one thing you mentioned. That's one thing that's been reiterated on our show many times before. It's not a cakewalk. You have to be serious about it, and they will hold you accountable. Now, when you got to the situation where you decided, you know what, I need to do this. This is something I'm going to make a commitment to, and I'm going to see this through to the end, and then go down that dangerous, not dangerous, but that struggle. I'm going to take on that burden and take that struggle to get better and recover. How do you see yourself today versus that person then who had to make that decision to be committed to recovery?
I'll say I don't know if I felt I had a choice, meaning, and not a choice that it was being forced on me. It was survival. When I found myself incarcerated when my infant son was 11 months old, and it was within that jail cell, kind of forced to detox and have those first, days of not being impacted by drugs and alcohol, that I really realized that something needs to be different. And it was in that moment that when treatment court was offered to me, I saw that as a blessing. I was scared, not scared because of what the program entailed. I was scared because I didn't know if I could achieve it. I didn't know if I could maintain sobriety. I was scared of myself. Today, that's what's different, is I'm not scared of myself anymore. I feel like recovery has given me that ability to know that I can make healthy choices. And even if I don't, because I make choices sometimes where I just think that was maybe not the best choice. I just have that insight now. I have that compassion for myself, that I can forgive myself. I can communicate now to others if it means an apology or making an amends. And that's what recovery has given me. I'm not scared of myself anymore.
Do you feel unstoppable in a way?
Oh, I definitely do. If you told me a decade ago that I'd be sitting here today doing what I'm doing, I'd tell you that you were so full of it. And that's one thing we tell, at the National Treatment Court Alumni Association, we say we're not unique. What we have, you can have. Recovery is for everybody. And that's such an important message, because that first day, when I was so scared of myself, I didn't think, when I saw others smiling, glowing, talking about what they were achieving, I didn't think I could have that. I thought they were unique. They had something special. And I learned over time, because I trusted in that process, and I learned over time that I too can have that. And I just had to continue to kind of trust in that process and trust in myself.
Do you see in the future that this becomes, because I'm going back to that question about when when somebody gets arrested, everybody gets a chance to have treatment court brought to them as an option, or if they're willing to go down that path. Where do you see treatment courts going in the future? And I ask this question to many people because I want to get everybody's different. Everybody has a different view of what they see at 10 years down the road. Because it seems like this could be the model to really change the criminal justice system.
Well, one thing that we've seen is what we've seen is across the board, we've had bipartisan support. It's one of the few, right? Like the few interventions that across the board we've seen support on both sides of the aisle. And with that, the research, as I shared with you, we depend on that research. And the research continues to tell us this works. And we're also All Rise, which is formerly known as the National Association of Drug Court Professionals. We're also moving forward to look at other opportunities for intervention that may not be specifically to treatment courts, because we recognize not everyone may be impacted by an arrest, for example, and so they may not be appropriate for a treatment court. But you had said that earlier, or you had asked that question, is what other interventions? And so we're looking at opportunities to support not only children that are impacted by family substance use, we're looking at law enforcement and the traumas that they impact how they're impacted through this work. And so we're looking at all areas of the justice system, because we know we're in this opportunity to really be able to navigate all of those different areas of the justice system, not just treatment and recovery court. So we're really excited for our rebrand. Just this year, just in June, we announced our rebrand, and really just moving forward with that. And so looking at all doors. So any way someone enters the justice system, we want to make sure that we're there at that door, and we're able to give them an opportunity, whether it's with peers, with treatment and recovery supports. We want to make sure they have an opportunity.
We've got about 30 seconds left. Have you ever met Martin Sheen?
I have not had an opportunity to meet Martin Sheen. I have met Leslie Jordan prior to his passing last year, and just some phenomenal individuals that are advocates for treatment courts, but not Martin Sheen. So if you're listening to this, I'd love to meet you.
That's Abby Frutchey. She is a board member of All Rise and involved with the founding of the National Treatment Court Alumni Association. Thank you for your time.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much.
This is America's Heroes Group. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Cliff Kelley, Vietnam veteran, co-founder, and host of America's Heroes Group. We have helped hundreds and thousands of veterans find the resources they needed to move on past trauma, find the services they need to heal, find training, jobs, and housing. That's our mission. To support this mission so that we can continue our work and have even more veteran stories of overcoming and success, we need your help. Right now, please consider making a donation to America's Heroes Group. Dig deep and give what you can to support this mission and help those veterans in need. You can donate through Chase Bank's Zelle app by adding America's Heroes Group as a recipient with our phone number 312-804-5831. You can donate through PayPal on our website, americashg.org. From the home page, go to donations, or you can go straight to www.americashg.org/donations. And finally, you can send a check to America's Heroes Group, Inc., 155 North Quaker Drive, Suite 4250, Chicago, Illinois, 60606.
We have in our chase bags, we have a care package of hygiene, we have shaving equipment, we have razors, and for the women we have the same personal hygiene items for them as well. And we want to say thank you for their service. This is Chase Bank. Thank you very much.
People in the neighborhood, free haircuts, the service, the food. Look good. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service.
Thank you for your service.
Okay. On behalf of Cliff Kelley, America's Heroes Group, we sincerely thank Chase Bank for coming where it matters to help homeless veterans have a hot meal today and a care package. We are sincerely grateful for this partnership. Yeah.
Welcome to America's Heroes Group. Hear your voice where we connect the disconnected intentionally.
Who is Cliff Kelley, the governor of talk radio, the icon of radio throughout the world.
Chauncey Spencer II and I, again, share a special relationship. His late great father, Tuskegee Airman Chauncey E. Spencer, took me as a child on my first airplane ride.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is something that people need to see. Often we don't, do the things to show how great our people are. It changes the paradigm of how people think about us, about the collective consciousness of what it means to be us.
And we've been having great conversations about trying to get more African Americans into aviation. And we got a bill that we're trying to get passed that would allow the Pell Grant to be used to help finance aviation education.
This is where I started with this entire conversation by saying, if it were not for America's Heroes Group, I would have given up. So I want to get all my accolades out the way on behalf of America's Heroes Group. Ms. Glenda, thank you. Thank you for encouraging me to press on. I would encourage you all to support this organization. One thing for sure, America's Hero Group is out there. Ms. Glenda will take the time. Ms. Glenda Smith will take the time to listen to you and to steer you in the direction that you need to go.
Thank you for watching another episode of America's Heroes Group, where we provide education about resources and information for our veterans, military, and their family.
Hi, this is Cliff Kelley, Vietnam veteran, co-founder, and host of America's Heroes Group. We have helped hundreds and thousands of veterans find the resources they needed to move on past trauma, find the services they need to heal, find training, jobs, and housing. That's our mission. To support this mission so that we can continue our work and have even more veteran stories of overcoming and success, we need your help. Right now, please consider making a donation to America's Heroes Group. Dig deep and give what you can to support this mission and help those veterans in need. You can donate through Chase Bank Zelle app by adding America's Heroes Group as a recipient with our phone number 312-804-5831. You can donate through PayPal on our website, americashg.org. From the home page, go to donations, or you can go straight to www.americashg.org/donations. And finally, you can send a check to America's Heroes Group, Inc., 155 North Quaker Drive, Suite 4250, Chicago, Illinois, 60606.
Relax. We have a meditation room. They can get food.
Hi, this is Cliff Kelley, Vietnam veteran, co-founder, and host of America's Heroes Group. We have helped hundreds and thousands of veterans find the resources they needed to move on past trauma, find the services they need to heal, find training, jobs, and housing. That's our mission. To support this mission so that we can continue our work and have even more veteran stories of overcoming and success, we need your help. Right now, please consider making a donation to America's Heroes Group. Dig deep and give what you can to support this mission and help those veterans in need. You can donate through Chase Bank Zelle app by adding America's Heroes Group as a recipient with our phone number 312-804-5831. You can donate through PayPal on our website, americashg.org. From the home page, go to donations, or you can go straight to www.americashg.org/donations. And finally, you can send a check to America's Heroes Group, Inc., 155 North Quaker Drive, Suite 4250, Chicago, Illinois, 60606.
Welcome back to America's Heroes Group, this time with our roundtable partner, the Veterans Legislative Voice, and our AHG correspondent. Today is Saturday, September 23rd, 2023. September is National Suicide Prevention and Hispanic Heritage Month. Our host is Cliff Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith. Our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scotch Honor Productions. And we have our partner with us again. That is Stephanie Coladas. He's our U.S. AHG correspondent, and she's a U.S. Army Reserve Sergeant First Class when she served. Now she's a veteran, founder, and creator of the Veterans Legislative Voice. How you doing today?
Doing good. How are you doing today?
Pretty good, pretty good. So we have 5 Republicans joined the Democrats to tank a GOP defense bill. Tell us about this.
Okay, so pretty much let's just give this a little bit of a premise for everyone. Every year, the Congress has to pass at least 12 appropriation bills to keep the government running. The most famous one is the National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA. I've talked about this at length before, these type of bills, and they need to pass it before October 1st every fiscal year. So we're getting really close to that, and the House and the Senate has created their own NDAA bills and have been passing them from chamber to chamber. The House bill that they've created and sent to the Senate actually had put amendments in and then sent it back to the House for approval. What happened recently with these 5 Republicans was that the House needed to bring to a vote just to debate about the bill, to talk about it, not even to vote for the passage of the bill. And 5 Republicans joined the Democrats to vote against it.
So that was, okay, go ahead.
The surprising part are a couple of those people that have done it. Most notably is Marjorie Taylor Greene, because she's such a supporter for Kevin McCarthy, the House Speaker, that it's kind of surprising that she joined against him. And the others weren't so surprising. They were others, Andy Biggs, Matt Rosendale, the obvious people from the Freedom Caucus that are typically in fights with Kevin McCarthy.
So what were they afraid of that would come out in the debate? So they voted to not debate the defense budget bill. So that gives me the idea that everybody's, for the most part, is okay with the defense budget as it is for next year. Am I reading something wrong?
One of the things is that the House bill had a lot of things that the extreme right from the Freedom Caucus wanted in. Okay. But then when it was with the Senate removed all of those, like 99% of those. Okay. And for example, it was the abortion, it was a little amendment in there to actually prevent the current DOD's compensation for travel for reproductive care.
That was one of the things we talked about at length, in a couple of shows, our previous shows.
Yes.
So that was one of the. So that was possibly an attempt to try to reintroduce what the Freedom Caucus. Is that their name? The Freedom Caucus, or what do they call it?
Yes. Yeah. It's basically what they're doing is taking a stand to what the Senate did, which is controlled by the Democrats. So of course, bills like, the restrictions to reproductive care in the military is going to be something that they're going to want, and they're going to fight against the Democrats with. So they are basically taking a stand over all of the changes that the Senate did.
Now, does this make Republican Senator McCarthy look weak as a leader?
Representative McCarthy, it does. It makes him a whole lot weaker so that he can't control. It seems like he can't even control his own political party. In comparison, sorry if you can hear the dogs. In comparison, Senator Pelosi, or excuse me, I'm doing it now. Speaker Pelosi from the House before, when she was Speaker, she 99% of the times when she brought things to a vote, she knew that the vote was going to pass. Like very, very rarely does she even see a bill not pass because she knew for sure it wasn't going to have a problem. So it's showing McCarthy is so much weaker because he can't even control his own party.
Yeah, I was thinking about a different McCarthy. But the thing of it is that it's interesting is that the GOP or the defense bill that's on the table right now looks like it's going to pass. Do you have an idea about what is in this bill currently as far as budget for Ukraine and things like that for the military?
Well, actually, that's a good question about Ukraine, because I can't remember if the funding for Ukraine was put back in, because I remember originally in that House bill did not have anything with Ukraine. And actually, it has modification for partnership program with Ukraine, specifically for here military trauma care and research. I'm looking right now in real time to see if there's any more funding added, but I know that the Republicans and some portions of the GOP is against adding more funding to Ukraine. So that could be part of the conversation that's happening.
So is this also a sign, or maybe a hopeful sign, that maybe at some point in the future there'll be more cooperation between Republicans and Democrats, since 5 Republicans joined the Democrats to try to tank this debate?
Honestly, no. The Democrats will vote against the Republican bill largely so that they don't win. And Republicans do the same thing. Democrats do the same thing on each side of the aisle. This one was just a really strange coincidence that they tend to vote with Democrats. And honestly, I don't think that's going to happen much. I was hoping it was going to happen when we had the 15 tries just to get McCarthy to become the speaker. I was hoping for somebody to start voting for Hakeem Jeffries, the Democrats' pick for the minority leader, so that for once we would actually get a minority speaker. Because technically it's not against the rules for somebody from the minority political party to become the Speaker of the House. It just ends up having to be the majority because they have the votes.
Now the Republican. Okay, go ahead.
I do not see any of the Republicans, at least on the extreme right, actually joining in with the Democrats on any of their actual platforms.
So more gridlock. Now, does that pose a risk for a government shutdown in the future?
Yes, it really does. One of the things that actually played against McCarthy's power is that when the House finally came together and voted him in, they voted for certain rules. Last congressional session happened during the COVID pandemic, so they actually brought in for the first time proxy voting, which means that representatives and senators can vote by proxy instead of physically having to be there. And Republicans who are even against, voting by mail for regular citizens, they're not going to support proxy voting. Well, a few Republicans were actually sick or out because of medical issues, and they couldn't vote by proxy. It might have actually played more into McCarthy's favor if he didn't take that rule out.
Now, how is Mitch McConnell doing? He's the minority whip for the Republicans. Now, what is going on in his situation? People were concerned about his health. Is there any news about that you heard?
Not so much, but I have seen a decent amount of speaking engagements that he's had since the second freezing, and he seems okay. So I'm not going to make any theories out there. Mostly because myself, with my own medical issues, you can't see it happening. So I've had people make negative remarks about me, so I'm not going to do that against McConnell. I'll be very nice about that. But the thing is that President Biden has actually came in support for McConnell for the health issues, which, you don't see that very often with being bipartisan. He said that, sometimes McConnell will have, that moment, you freeze or you think and you're in your own little trance. He says that happens with McConnell on occasion, and it's, no real big deal. It just happens to happen when he was actually speaking in front of cameras. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think all of us at AHG, we always have the attitude that we always want to see our leaders healthy and successful and have real debates about issues, and we never want to wish anybody ill will or anybody to be harmed or go through any kind of physical ailment. So hopefully he's in good spirits and hopefully he's healthy. But at the same time, we want him to do a good job of leading the country and hopefully cooperating with the other parties, Democrats and independents, to try and solve problems and not create problems.
Yes, and he was actually diagnosed with a TBI when he had his fall and hurt his hip. So, those type of things, freezing for TBIs, because I have one myself, freezing with times when you're lost in a thought can happen, even more likely with a TBI. So, I'll just leave it as proven things that he actually has for his medical issues.
Now, what are some sticking points that you might see coming down the road with getting a budget finally approved, where we don't have we have to worry about any possible government shutdowns? Make sure everything is funded. We're not just kicking the can down the road. What do we need to get over or agree on?
Now that there's a bunch of things, because the extreme right, they do have much more power than they rarely do because everything is so split. One of the things that they're really fighting about really is a lot of spending cuts. Because they were really upset with all of the increased spending, or at least the increased things passed in the past for funding. And so they want to cut a lot of that. And that's one of the things that I'm really worried about in the future. One of the things that has been rising up with the House as well, and Glenda and I have spoken about this before, the House is threatening to subpoena the VA in order to get more data about the abortions that they are now performing. Since the recension of Roe v. Wade and the Dobbs decision, the VA had changed their policy of not doing any abortions to only doing the abortions whenever it is from rape, incest, or the health and welfare of the mother. Excuse me. And the VA has given 2 reports to the House about how they're doing, what's going on. But the thing is that the House wants more information. But the thing is that there's an argument between the VA and the House Veterans Affairs Committee. What the Veterans Affairs Committee is asking for is basically the specific conditions and the reasons why they chose to recommend and perform the abortions based off of the women's health. And the worry about that is privacy, because it can be against HIPAA from knowing. The VA has only performed 54 abortions as of April of this year. So as of April, back all the way to August of the previous year, of that time frame, they've only performed 54. 44 were because of the health of the mother.
That'll be an interesting debate to see what they decide as far as HIPAA rules when it pertains to military people, military workers, because if you're in the military, technically you're a government issue.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, your property. Sam.
Right. So that'll be very interesting to see, and that could have far-reaching implications if they actually are able to get those records.
Well, because they're veterans and they're private citizens now, it's a little bit different. But the thing is that the military has gotten in trouble before for accidentally releasing military personnel records. If you remember, there was a lady running as a representative, and Air Force had actually released her personnel files to the opposition, and they basically found that she was a victim of military sexual trauma, and that got out. So they're probably going to be acting a lot more stringent now on rules, especially for HIPAA.
And we know who that is. She's going to be on our show later today, actually. But so the thing of it is, I think it's so disconcerting is that we still are not working together to solve problems. It seems like more political tit for tat and more of a chess play than actually trying to solve anything.
Yeah, it feels like we're governing from crisis to crisis. I found a quote a little while back about that, is that President Obama said after the 2013 government shutdowns, he says, we need to get away out of the habit of governing through crises, and it feels like we never broke that habit.
So what are some of the other things that are happening in Congress right now that we need to know about?
Oh, well, other than the government shutdown. Well, one of the things that we've been watching right now is things that have been rolling down the road with Merrick Garland and questions around that's going around with the Justice Department, which can get a little bit scary. I worry about how the Justice Department is being involved, because you know what? They help out with all the other agencies as well. If they're going to be so consumed with everything that's been going on now and everything in Congress, it can cause a lot of issues from there. So that's where I'm getting a little bit concerned. It doesn't hit military and veterans directly, but you know what? It doesn't help with their workload.
Wow, interesting. So, what do you see as a what's your? I asked you this question before. What's your take on how likely we are to shut down?
I say that we're more likely to shut down than we were to default last June.
Really?
Yeah, because you know what? There's less implications that happens when we do shut down. I mean, there are some, because we do lose a lot of money a day, because when things close, the national parks close. You know, anything national and federal closes, so they're not charging fees to come in. They're not charging entrances. IRS agents are not working their regular workload to audit things. So we can still lose a lot of money, but defaulting would be a lot more traumatic. So, and also we have had many government shutdowns since we've been allowed to do the government shutdown. So I'm pretty sure it's going to happen. It probably won't last as long as it's happened before in the past, like 35 days under President Trump. But I suspect it's going to happen because they're so far apart on where their agreements are I mean, it's just like the strikes with the Writers Guild and the SAG Corps.
Mm-hmm. Now we have a little bit of time left. What do you see happening with the election? So the Republican Party are fighting amongst themselves without Trump.
Yeah.
We have about 2 minutes left to go into that. What are your thoughts on that?
It's really up to the voters on what they understand, what is really going on. I really encourage a lot of people to try to dig in and understand what has been going on. What I worry about is the possible lies that some of the politicians may spew out because of things that happen. A few politicians may say that we're saving money by doing the government shutdown, but like my example before, you're actually losing more money because you're not collecting, you're not paying bills and things like that. So I really hope that once people understand more things that's been going on and not get tied into the lies that they may see on the news or the internet, what have you, hopefully we go down a much better route. There might be a few GOP people that might not be reelected because they were so close to losing. For example, I think it was Lauren Boebert won by only 500 votes. So who knows how many she may lose for the next one. It could be just 1,000.
Somebody actually said that shutting down the government saves money.
Yes.
That is crazy.
Yeah. But the thing is that, the government pays bills, and if they don't pay the bills, just like a lot of people, you get charged interest.
Right.
Interest.
Exactly. Exactly.
And what you could still charge the government penalty for not paying the bills. I wish they could do that if they skip a bill and skip paying me for a paycheck or two. Wow.
Then, so, what do you see happening with? What are your thoughts on Trump and his once again court troubles? I guess as many court troubles that he finds himself in.
I worry that the court cases that might be going through, that they might be delayed enough to actually go after the election. There might be one that would sneak right through, which I'm looking towards that it might be the D.C. one because the other courts or attorney generals are actually working in partnership to try to get the best one to go forward before the next election. And so I really hope for that happening. The other thing about with Trump and the 14th Amendment is that he could technically not see himself on the ballot because of his court case in D.C. Technically, you don't need a conviction of insurrection to not be put on the ballot. You just has to be, in theory, thought that you may have been doing insurrection. But some people might want to wait for the conviction. So that's pretty much the one for us to really watch.
We got in 10 seconds. I know Glenn's going to be upset, but in 10 seconds, can you tell me, do you think there was anything political about the timing of this whole thing? Yes or no answer?
100% political because they're trying to get whatever gains they have and show off their power. Matt Gaetz is trying to run for governor.
Yes. We're running out of time. This is Stephanie Collada. Thank you for your time. This is America's Heroes Group. We'll be right back. Welcome back to America's Heroes Group, this time with a roundtable with our partner, Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer-Ruth Green, founder and CEO of Battle Proven Leadership. Today is Saturday, September 23rd, 2023. September is National Suicide Prevention and Hispanic Heritage Month. Our host is Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And of course, we have our partner, Jennifer-Ruth Green, Lieutenant Colonel of the Indiana Air National Guard and graduate of the United States Air Force Academy, combat veteran of Iraqi freedom, and founder and CEO of Battle Proven Leadership. How are you doing today?
Good, Sean. Happy Saturday. September is exciting. Thank you so much for having me once again. It's an honor to be here.
It's always a pleasure to have you. So you want to continue our discussion about leadership. And one of the things you mentioned as one of the talking points is about relationships and how gaps diminish relationships. What do you mean by that?
Yes. So just like in any relationship that you have with any person that you're close to, when there's a difference between what you say and what you do, people struggle. And so it's important to diminish that gap as often as possible. I've heard this quote, and I really like it. It's not original with me, but it says, your walk talks and your talk talks, but your walk talks louder than your talk talks. Mm-hmm. So what you say what you do speaks far louder than what you say. Mm-hmm. And so if those two things don't match, there's going to be great difficulty. And that's one of the things that we wanted to try to talk about and really hone in on by providing clear pathways for people to understand how they can make sure that the say-do gap is non-existent in how they interact and engage with people.
Why is it, in your opinion, easier to say something versus do something? If you're saying it, I'm assuming, or I would think that you believe it. And if you believe it, I would think that you would actually do it. So why is there a gap in the first place?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about that the other day, as a matter of fact, and I was thinking about kind of the transactional relationships as opposed to genuine relationships. And in transactional relationships, you have somebody who's expecting something or wants to have something as a result of that connection. And so in connecting with people, being genuine is so important. And so if you have somebody that's transactional, you can't really trust what they say. You can only watch what they do. And so in genuine relationships, if you're not motivated by anything other than serving someone else, that'll be very clear. And so I think the why is not necessarily something I can answer, but how you can analyze one or the other is by examining your motives. If you are really going into a leadership experience or a connection with a supervisor or a connection with a subordinate, then if you evaluate, hey, what do I want to get out of this? And if it's an opportunity to mentor someone, an opportunity to serve someone, an opportunity to make someone better, it's easier to make your say-do gap match or to not have a say-do gap. But if I'm focused on solely making sure that I look good, then I will tell you whatever you want so that you'll make sure that I look good. And there's obviously going to be this disconnect. It's like, hey, Sean, you matter to me. You're the best radio host I've ever had the opportunity to work with, which is true. But if I wanted you to invite me back, then I would keep saying those things, regardless of whether it was true or not. But I want to make sure that people know you're amazing, good conversationalist, and, a great host. So it absolutely makes for an easy opportunity for me to have, a genuine conversation and connection with you about that.
You're all too kind. So what I'm hearing is that motivation is really, you said the word motivation. I think that's really key because when you kind of laid it out, because that really comes down to integrity. So telling people what they want to hear versus actually believing in what you're saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, when people are trying to connect with others, that genuine nature, that integrity, that who I am, what you see is what you get, thought process is going to go so much further. I had the opportunity, responsibility to run for public office last cycle. And in shaking people's hands, sometimes people would say to me, Jennifer-Ruth, I feel like you're so real. I feel like what you say is what you believe. Now, whether they believe that I was genuinely wrong, at least they believe that I was genuine. And they believe that I believed it. And I wanted to connect with them. And so sometimes when people use the word politician, sometimes that has, a negative bent to it because people feel like that automatically evokes this thought of transactional relationships. And so people aren't necessarily excited about what they think you are. It's what they know you are. So they might think you're smart. They might think that you, and walk away and think that you have great views and all those things. But if your life doesn't match, right? We have to have integrity in our office. We have to make sure that we serve the American people. And they find out that, during a hurricane, you evacuate while everyone else has to stay behind because there's no hurricane evacuation for you. People are going to say, do you really care about us? And so the thought process of being a politician and the integrity matching that is such a very big deal. And we see it across, the spectrum of life, not just in leadership, but everything that we do, it matters.
So, and that brings me to a point that you mentioned in your talking points. So what you do in moderation, people who follow you will do in excess. You mentioned that earlier before. Give us an example of what that means.
Absolutely. So last time we talked about how kids will mimic everything that you say and everything that you do. And I think that anybody who's a parent understands that with great reality. But as a leader, if you believe that you could walk in 5 minutes late and because you're not accountable to anyone, that people won't see it or people won't respond to it, it's going to be very difficult when somebody walks in 20 minutes late. And if you haven't said anything to the team, man, I'm sorry. I really had car troubles this morning. It was a really big issue for me. Sorry, I'm tardy, everyone. And then you keep it moving. It's going to be very difficult for you to not seem like a hypocrite when someone shows up 30 minutes late because they had car troubles and you discipline them or you get on them. And so I think it's important for us as leaders to think about the fact that I may do something in moderation. People are going to think it's okay in excess. I show up 5 minutes late, people are going to show up 30 minutes late. And you say, why would you show up 30 minutes late? The question is, well, why are you a hypocrite? You show up 5 minutes, you show up late. Late is late. Mm-hmm. And so people don't have the same thought process. They just know that it's on or off. Late's okay, late's not okay. 5 minutes, 35 minutes, if one's okay, then the other's okay. So that's the concept I think I want people to walk away with, that you may say up to 5 to 7 minutes late is okay. Like, you have to set a standard, set a line. You have to abide by it because other people are going to, give people an inch, they're going to take a mile. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the thought process with that.
How hard is it to be vulnerable when you're a leader?
I think, how difficult is it? I think that's an individual statement, but I can tell you that it is a heavily weighted aspect of how people connect with you. When you are vulnerable, you show that you have flaws. And nobody can work and live alongside somebody that's perfect without, or that perceives that they're perfect. Because I heard this, I'll give you this. I heard this thought process of integrity. Somebody said, what do you think is the best definition of integrity? And I said, well, I've traditionally heard that it's doing the right thing when nobody's looking. And so my colleague said, I think that's a great definition, but I would add something else to it to make it a little bit more complete. And he said, being willing to admit that you're wrong. Integrity is being willing to admit when you're wrong. And I said, that's really interesting. Why would you say that? And he said, because if you cannot admit that you're wrong and other people know, then you're lying to yourself and you're lying to them. Mm-hmm. And that shows a lack of integrity. So the vulnerability to say, hey, this is a weak area for me. Hey, this is something that I need help with is such a big deal. I had a colleague who was vulnerable with his boss, and he was a functioning alcoholic. And he had a very difficult situation where he and his wife were going through some struggles as a result of his functioning alcoholism. Nobody knew that he was had a drinking problem, but one day he and his wife had talked about it. It came to a head through a specific situation, and he said, I'm done. No more drinking. And he quit drinking 100% dry, and he went to his boss and said, hey, boss, I just letting you know, this is a situation for me. This is my family situation. This is my personal situation. And I just, want to let you know that that's where I am. Just as a courtesy to be vulnerable and to let someone know that that's what's happening in my life.
Wow.
And the boss said, hey, appreciate you letting me know. Thanks for that. But immediately that evening, the boss had already planned kind of a get-together for the entire unit, and he was a rum taster. So he had several bottles of rum that he loved to sample and that he brought for other people to sample. And so he had that conversation with his colleague, and then shortly thereafter sent out the invitation and said, hey, we're having a rum tasting tonight. I want to invite everybody to come. It's going to be a great time. Would love to have you. And I think the more sensitive thing to do in the middle of that vulnerability would be to say, hey, this is an activity that I have fun and I appreciate and enjoy, but perhaps let's save it for another time. That would have been the proper response as a leader. And so my friend giving a vulnerable, statement and sentiment to his boss, now his boss has lost the opportunity for my friend to want to be vulnerable with him. And he's just erased any opportunity to want to connect. And it doesn't matter what the boss does, but vulnerability is difficult. And when you respond accordingly, or at least appropriately, then there's a clear opportunity to continue that. And when you are able to be vulnerable, you can build trust. And when you build trust, you build teams. And when you build teams, amazing things happen.
I think that trust aspect is really important. But then also, too, for me, I've always looked at the ability to be honest and or ability to admit your mistakes as just a process of integrity, basically being honest. And I saw that as a strength for people. I never faulted anybody for admitting that they're wrong. And I actually see that as a strength of an individual, because if you can admit that you're wrong, then you can get it right. But before you can get it right, you got to know when you're wrong. Scientists, people that are researchers understand this and appreciate this the most, because when they're doing their work, they present it and it goes through trial periods or things like that. And that's the opportunity for people around them to find their mistakes. The best athletes, the best people in any endeavor. I love and appreciate criticism. I love criticism because then that helps me get better. I'm never going to be mad if somebody criticizes me, as long as it's a valid criticism, So I appreciate that what you brought up, because I think it's so important, and particularly people in the military, to define the strength to be honest, especially when you are wrong, because then you do get the trust of your subordinates. You do get the trust of people around you and your coworkers, and then also helps you get it right.
I agree.
Wow.
I think there's this counter that there's this thought process that runs counter to vulnerability, which is ego. And so we've talked a lot about how leaders exist to serve and not be served. But if you have the wrong mindset and you are the one that has to be on a pedestal, has to be the one that everybody looks up to, has to be the one that can never at any point have any flaws, then that ego will run counter to vulnerability. And vulnerability may be admitting that you're wrong, but vulnerability may be admitting that you're weak and saying, hey, I know we have our PT test coming up and I want to learn how to run faster, or I'm barely meeting the times and I want to make sure that I can, get some good practice laps in. Would you run with me? And it doesn't matter the rank. If you're capable of being a major and running with an airman and asking the airman to train you or the private to train you, like, that's great. And so it just shows that your ego is not as important as the reality of the team needing to be better. And you don't want to be the weak link, and admitting that you need help, like you said, is the first step to getting better. Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, their first step is admitting that you have a problem. And I think it's a universal thing, but I think it counters the ego in so many ways. And in leadership, it's a very clear opposite sometimes from people that feel like they have to be somebody as opposed to being who they really are.
You ever heard of a gentleman named David Goggins?
No, I have not.
He was a U.S. Navy SEAL, and when he joined the Navy, I think he failed like their version of the boot camp or training, whatever you want to call it, for Navy SEAL training. He failed it like 3 times, something like that. But he kept doing it over and over again, and he just let himself be vulnerable. He kept on putting himself in these bad situations. Somebody might say from the outside, but then he ended up being like one of the most feared Navy SEALs like the whole time. This guy is This guy is a beast. He's a beast.
Sure.
He has several books out right now. I think maybe 1 or 2. I don't know. And you should check him out. David Goggins is his name. Former Navy SEAL. He's got YouTube channels, been on Joe Rogan and a bunch of places and things like that. Really, really interesting guy. Probably the most scariest man you will ever meet in your life. But
oh man, I appreciate that recommendation.
Yeah,
David Goggins.
Like turning your vulnerabilities into strength. That is really, because that's what you described is when you admit your faults and mistakes. And he always was a person who just owned up and just faced his demons head on. He was that kid that was picked on and things like that when he was a kid, and then all of a sudden he grew up. And now he's the guy that scares people when he walks into the room. It's like, and it's just,
I hear
amazing.
that.
Yeah. So when you ran for office in Indiana. So what did you learn from your experiences? What did that teach you about leadership, and also about what did you learn from the process of running for office? And tell us about what you ran for, what you were doing.
So I had the opportunity to run for Congress in Indiana's 1st congressional district, and we have a district of about 700,000 people, and it's an opportunity to meet people across 2.5 counties, and depending obviously on the size of your district, you may have to travel, sometimes 5-6 hours. In fact, the entire state of Montana is one district, but here it's across 2.5 counties. And so it is a amazing place. Cities that people may know are Gary and Hammond and Valparaiso and Crown Point, things like that. And so we have a pretty broad spectrum of just people with various backgrounds. We have urban dwellers, we have farmers, we have people from all over. And so it's a very diverse group of people who are absolutely amazing. There's a huge spectrum on income. There's a huge spectrum on education. There's a huge spectrum as far as just activities and what you would say as far as, a 180, a farmer to a business person. And so, but great people all around. And so it was my responsibility to connect with people, shake hands, help people understand the vision that I had for Northwest Indiana, and provide them with a clear intent and an honest effort to earn their vote. And so in thinking about leadership, we're talking about books, and I just sent my first book to the Air Force to evaluate. The Department of Defense takes a look and says, hey, are there any security concerns? Are you giving away any tradecraft or, any of that? And so the first book is called People Don't Quit Their Jobs, They Quit Their Bosses. And that's going to be coming out here in the next couple months, and so I'm very excited about that. But the lessons learned from the campaign are largely reflected in that book, and these are some of the things that we talk about. So in my campaign, there was an instance where political opposition took my personnel records, and in my personnel records, inappropriately placed, is a record of sexual assault that I experienced when I was in Baghdad. And they took that and made it national news. And it was a very difficult time for me. Clearly, it was something that was very private. It was something that was very personal. It was not something that was public. And they decided to make it public. And it honestly put me into a huge tailspin. And it was very much secondary assault. You live through the physical, or you live through the emotional, mental, spiritual pains that you experienced the first time. And when that occurred and it became public, it was, like I said, very difficult. But I felt like as many people as I had met tens of thousands of people, given hundreds of speeches across the previous 18 months, and I felt incredibly alone. 5 people of all the people that I had known and met across the entirety of my life reached out to me and said, hey, are you okay? And I think that was because, in thinking about it later, reflecting on it later, connecting with my friends later, it was because they thought and assumed that somebody else was going to call. And they said, you're probably so busy, or somebody else had already called, or I figured your phone was going to be flooded. I feel like your inbox was going to be flooded. And so I just didn't want to bother you. And so I struggled with that. And I thought, I had the opportunity, I'll preface this story with this, I had the opportunity to reconcile and connect with some friends as a result of the difficulties that I experienced. But one of the difficulties I experienced was with my leadership. My leadership knew about the situation. And I say this not to be difficult or to create any sort of victim ideology, but just to tell a real story. I hadn't been at military drill for about 7 or 8 months. And when I came back into drill, the first thing they said to me was, all right, we've got to get your computer-based training knocked out, and then we've also got to get your weapons training knocked out. And so nobody had checked on me. Nobody knew my mental health. Nobody knew my mental state. Nobody knew, the difficulties I was experiencing. But the first thing they wanted to do was put a loaded weapon in my hand. And I wasn't homicidal by any stretch. I wasn't suicidal, but nobody knew whether I was or not. And so the thought process that nobody was concerned enough about me as a person, but rather they were concerned about me as a cog. They didn't have compassion. They had a cog in the wheel that needed to get fixed. That to me showed a lack of leadership. Because if you cared about me as a person, then you would say, 1, how are you doing? And 2, before we do anything that involves anything dangerous or high risk, let me see how you're doing. Let's get the chaplain, the director of psychological health, your commander. Let's have that conversation. And so when I thought about that, I said, I did have the opportunity to speak truth to power and speak to my leadership and say, this hurt me. This was hard. I felt like I was a to-do list on a checklist, or I was an item on a checklist, an item on your to-do list, and I struggled with that. And then we had the opportunity, to connect and say, hey, bad decision. I'm sorry. Should have done it differently. And we are squared away, A-okay, everything's perfect. But then I sat down and I thought, what? How would I want to respond to a colleague of mine who had great traumatic difficulties? And how would I want to be responded to as, from a leadership perspective? What would I want my bosses to do? What would I want them to say? And I would say, you know what? At the end of the day, I never want anybody to feel like they are an item on my checklist. I want them to know that they are valued. Because when I convey value, then they can trust me. And when they can trust me, we can build a team, because a team is a group of people who trust one another. And a group of people who trust one another can do amazing things. And like we've talked about before, we have teams, groups of people who wear the same uniform, not a team. Group of people who are motivated behind the same mission, not a team. We all see, a basketball, people wearing basketball jerseys that don't play well together. And you're like, man, you guys aren't a team. You're just out there, doing one-man shows or one-woman shows. And so uniforms a team does not make. Winning and having, earning another win in the belt, that does not a team make, because everybody wants to win, but the trust is what makes the team environment. And so I didn't feel as if I could accurately, I didn't feel as if I had accurately heard that I was a trusted asset, that I was a valuable teammate. And those things were reflected in the lack of response to this particular large-scale, difficult, devastating event. And so at the end of the day, the biggest thing that I learned was, how do I want to lead? And these principles that we're talking about are a reflection of that thought process. So I asked myself the question, how would I want to convey value? How do I accurately convey value? And these are the things. Don't tell me you care about me, but not show me. Don't tell me you care about me and then sign me up for weapons training after great trauma without any conversation in between. So that was a giant say-do gap. But I will say that they were gracious, they were vulnerable, and they said, you know what, I'm sorry, I should have done better. And that was an amazing thing for me to be able to reconcile that. But that's kind of, some of the things we talk about in the book, just being honest, me sharing my failures, sharing my successes, both as a leader and a follower, and helping people to understand how to convey value, because I never want somebody to feel like they're an item on my to-do list.
When can we expect your book to be out?
The book will be out in December of 2023. People don't quit their jobs, they quit their bosses.
Wow.
Become the leader others want to follow.
Looking forward to it. You got to come back and talk about it when it's out.
Absolutely. It'd be an honor.
So we're wrapping up now. We got about 2 seconds left as Glenda gets her microphone together. She's going to want to probably say a couple of things to you as well, I know. But like, what would you say is your future within America's Heroes Group?
Well, you know what? I am actively praying. America's Heroes Group does a great job, and they are on track to be syndicated, and I look forward to being a part of helping other people learn how to be more effective leaders.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Jennifer, you are simply the best, and I do not say that without sincerity. I just really respect your integrity, your intelligence, and your substance as a woman. And thank you for serving a country. And I always pray and say that hopefully we'll get an understanding that the country must serve you all as well. So thank you for being of excellence. Sincerely.
Praise God.
We are so blessed to have you as a partner. What a great show. What a great show. Sincerely. So just as she said, team. America's Heroes Group is not a team without Sean Claiborne. Sean been with us since 2016, and he has evolved into the best co-host this show has probably ever had because of his range, because of the way he interviews. I get the feedback. People get a little hesitant, a little bit like, okay, so Sean, because they know they got to be prepared because Sean does his homework. So bravo, Sean Claiborne.
That's right.
To our digital media producer. We have never looked like this before in terms of programming, in terms of digital presentation like this since we started the show. And that's the thanks that we will give always to our digital media director producer, Ivan Ortega of Scott's Earner Production, because he has taken our show and taken it to a different platform in terms of reach, in terms of delivery, and that's because of digital. That's where the future are guys. So if you need exposure, if you need presentation, if you need reach, please call Scott's Earner Production at 773-671-482. Help me, Ivan. 26. Once again, that number 773-671-4826, and ask him, just consult with him regarding how can I scale my business? How can I make my business better? How can I turn a profit if I become digital? He is fair in his price, but he is well versed in his expertise at what he does. We're living proof of it. So to all you all on behalf of Cliff, Dr. Erna, all of us, the staff that it brings it all. We don't get paid to do this. We do it from our heart because we know this platform is needed. It is needed to give our military population their voice. This is America's Heroes Group. We wishing all of you all a beautiful and safe, healthy weekend.